So I used to work at a restaurant called the Black Eyed Pea. I was waiting tables, and you came in one day, and it was either lunch or dinner, and you had just told me, "Hey, I just got this new school, and it's in Glendale, Maryland." Oh, that's down the street from Bowie. And I kept thinking, like, maybe I'll take him up on it. Maybe I'll take him up on it. And eventually, I did. But if he hadn't come in to, and I hadn't sat in my section, I might not have known.
That's
I might
true.
Totally not known it. None of this would have happened.
You may have never had a career in martial arts. That's interesting. And the thing too, which is kind of interesting, is that there are obviously lots of different martial arts schools, but I'm with the Jhoon Rhee Institute and Jhoon Rhee Taekwondo. I mean, Grandmaster Jhoon Rhee, he's credited for bringing Taekwondo to the United States. Set camp in Washington, D.C., 12 schools in the area, probably produced the most champions than any other school in the sport karate field. Right? Mallory's old boss, Charlie Lee, being one of them, being huge. But anyway, so my school is at Jhoon Rhee in Glendale, but Mallory's dad is actually a very accomplished person from the Jhoon Rhee Institute also. So it's crazy because he kind of kept in the same school, and man, I'll tell you, it was an honor. It was awesome because your dad would come by for your belt graduations, and I'm like, oh, this guy's OG.
That's right, and he would.
That's right.
Because of that, Grandmaster Rhee knew who I was, and I would always, I would have that in because of my dad. And I remember specifically planning. I had gotten my white belt, and I was going to go home at Thanksgiving and tell my dad, because I was in school. I didn't want him to know because he wanted me to start when I was like 6 or 7. And, I wasn't interested at the time. I would go to the school. I would go to Marlow Heights, which was one of your original schools, where you learned. And I would go up there and I would sit and I would watch class, but I had no interest in taking it. And eventually I had to wait until I was 19, way down the line, and then said, okay, I think I want to do this. But I didn't have any interest when I was younger. But I think one of the things that the great thing, whenever I interview someone, I ask them, I said, so what is one of the best gifts that the martial arts has given to you? For me, it was learning and traveling to tournaments with my dad, seeing him reconnect with older friends and compete against and introducing them to me. And also he would always, every time we would drive back from New York or from Virginia Beach or wherever we would go, it was like a debrief. He was like, you did good today, but I want you to do this more. I want you to work on this more.
Nice.
And eventually it was one day, I remember I was warming up at a tournament in DC, and my dad was like, you need to warm up. And I was like, well, Dad, I'm going to clobber everybody here. I'm smoke everybody. He says, no, you need to warm up. So I did what he asked, and I started warming up, and I'm throwing kicks at him, and I'm pulling him, and he stopped it. I remember I had to pull this kick. I thought I was going to kick him right in the head. And he just stops. And he literally bows to me, says, you're a better fighter than I am. He says, do what you need to do. And it was like his way of telling me that, you don't need coaching anymore. And man, I had the biggest head that day. I think I waxed everybody at that tournament because I just, your dad's just boom. He's patted you on the back and said, all right, you know what? You don't need my help anymore. I'm just going to sit back and watch you do your thing. That was nice. That was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that was cool. That was something else.
So the man who opened up the school, is he still around?
Unfortunately, he passed. Yeah, yes. He passed. Gosh, what is it, Mal? It's like 3 years now. 3 years ago. Yeah, Grandmaster Jhoon Rhee. He had a bad bout with shingles. Was ultimately what it was. I mean, he was credited. I mean, he was known for a lot of fantastic feats. I was actually just telling my students today that he would do 1,000 push-ups a day. He would do 10 sets of 100 every day, right? And this was when he was like 60 years old, and he was on Good Morning America on the TV show, and he was doing push-ups there. He was on Parade magazine. I mean, he was. There are more magazine covers of him than any other thing. I mean, he is on every magazine cover. Plus on top of that, he's credited for training Bruce Lee. You know, I mean, he trained Bruce Lee, other people, big ones, Tony Robbins, Muhammad Ali. Yeah, he taught him the acupunch. He taught on Capitol Hill for almost 50 years, taught congressmen and senators free lessons. Because of that, I helped him teach. I became good friends with Jesse Jackson Jr. and a lot of other, notable politicians. But he kind of he was extremely accomplished. Let me tell you, you could Google Jhoon Rhee on YouTube and you will see so much. And he is just an amazing martial artist for sure.
Definitely Google the Jhoon Rhee commercial. Nobody
Jhoon Rhee commercial.
bothers me.
It's like one of those local commercials that
it was a local commercial, and as a little throwback, if you've ever watched the show The Americans, great show on I think it was on
WB,
FX.
I think.
No, it was on FX. The Americans is a spy thriller set in the Washington D.C. area in the late 60s into the 70s, where these sleeper Russian agents who were, their whole sole purpose was to just integrate in and just act like Americans, and they would be given missions. And the interesting thing about that whole series is they said Russians were always scared of us as we were scared of them. Remember the whole thing about Russia's got this big nuclear arsenal, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. But anyway, during that TV show, they would show authentic commercials that you would see during the time. And the Jhoon Rhee commercial did premiere in that show. I found out about that show because Jhoon Rhee, who is Jhoon Rhee, Grandmaster Rhee's son, is Nobody Bothers Me Either, little kid, maybe about 4 or 5 at the time when he did the commercial. And he got a call from the producers like, we would like permission to use this commercial in our show. And we were talking one day and I was like, I've never heard of this show before. And I started watching it just for that sole purpose. It's a really great series. But there's a local commercial, Dow USA 1000. Jhoon Rhee is Mike for Right. It's embedded in my head. I remember it. I would see it on TV when I was watching TV as a kid. But it's a local commercial.
Well, that's basically the reason I signed up.
They showed the kid jumping over the motorcycle. You're like, oh man, yeah, I got to get involved in this.
Is this like 80s?
That commercial was early 70s, I think, maybe mid to late 70s. Okay. I think that's about right. But you can grab that clip from YouTube and.
All right, I got it up. You want me to share it?
Oh
yeah, share it. Let's see.
All right.
When you take Jhoon Rhee self-defense, then you too can say, nobody bothers me, nobody bothers me. Call USA 1000. Jhoon Rhee means might for right.
Nobody buys me.
Oh, that's 70s. Yes.
Oh, that's classic. That is gold.
Jhoon Rhee. All right. That is something I'm going to be looking up too. And you mentioned earlier about him training Bruce Lee. Did Bruce graduate and start Jeet Kune Do?
Well, so Bruce Lee had met. So back in the day, back in the 60s, there were only 2 big tournaments, martial arts tournaments in the United States. Only 2. Ed Parker on the West Coast, and he's known for Kempo. And then the Jhoon Rhee Internationals on the East Coast from Grandmaster Rhee. So Bruce Lee would I think they met kind of on that whole net, and he was kind of getting famous and stuff like that. But they just became really good friends, and they started brainstorming a lot. And Bruce Lee would actually come and spend the summers in the Washington D.C. area, and he would be a guest instructor at some of the schools. And it's pretty crazy because I've met people. I was like, oh yeah, I was at this school, and Bruce Lee taught me, and my instructor. Oh, there you go.
Hey,
there's a good share right there. Yep. And they had a good trading of ideas, and I think so. Bruce Lee, originally Wing Chun stylist, had developed Jeet Kune Do because he wanted to kind of adapt and kind of modernize the system, make it more practical. Mm-hmm. But in his movies, he's doing primarily Kung Fu until it comes to a sidekick.
Bam.
And this is the kick where he just like hauls through and he kicks a dude through a wall or whatever. And that is a textbook Taekwondo sidekick. And there you go. And he learned that from Grandmaster Jhoon Rhee. And there you go. Now the thing too.
This is my favorite one, by the way.
The Big Boss.
Yes.
So Jhoon Rhee was supposed to be in Game of Death, the third floor where there was a Hapkido guy, right?
Is this where Kareem Abdul-Jabbar comes in?
Yeah, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the top floor, right?
Yes.
But the floor before that, I think, was actually intended to be for Jhoon Rhee, but I don't know the story behind it. But what's really amazing, and I've seen this, I'm very close with the family, is that there is a set of letters that I've seen that was handwritten from Bruce Lee to Grandmaster Jhoon Rhee on Jeet Kune Do stationery by his hand. And we could have so easily used this for marketing and exploited it, but we never did. But yeah. I've read the letter that said, because of your safety equipment, because he invented safety equipment, you have taken martial arts out of the dark ages, or something like, I want to thank you for teaching me the new and powerful sidekick. And I saw one letter was just a poem where that Bruce Lee had written to Grandmaster. I mean, they had a very special friendship
was it like
together.
Poem, or was it like haiku poem?
It was just a poem, yeah.
And don't forget, he was a philosophy major.
He is, Bruce Lee's philosophy, Tao Chi Kung Do is one of my favorite books, but that was something else. But yeah, they had a very, very close history for sure.
If you get just getting deep into that, if you look into in terms of Kung Fu, they have kind of a version of a sidekick. It's much different than a Korean-based Taekwondo sidekick. We're using your quad, your hip, every muscle in your leg. And the difference is what you see Bruce Lee doing to people. And you're like, oh, that guy threw himself the ball. Like, no, the much power he generated, that guy didn't need to jump. Bruce provided all the necessary force needed to that. And it's just the difference in kicks. And yes, you can argue in style and this, that, and the other. And there are differences all through every different flavor and sort of martial arts that has ever been created on how this should be done. Turn your ankle this way, point your toes this way, do this, do that. And I think they tried to even prove that with what's that series on Discovery years ago where they measured a Taekwondo sidekick or a round kick from Muay Thai versus Taekwondo versus this.
I remember that.
I can't remember the name.
I remember that as well, but it was something along the lines of medieval warriors going up against each other.
Oh, you're talking where they took warriors where they would speculate like the
like the armor, how
blah blah blah.
Strong it was.
This was I think it was called Fight Science, if I remember right.
Yeah.
In which they used they did a lot of things with sensors and everything, measuring pressure, measuring speed, even looking at the balance that specific styles, how they shift their weight from the front of their foot to the rear of their foot to throw certain techniques, trying to really break it down scientifically. And by saying, according to science and according, to the amount of joules and getting into physics and everything, this kick is the strongest, this, that, and the other. But, hey, go back to Jhoon Rhee where it was, what is it? Let me make sure I get this right. What is it? I fear not the man that's, help me out here, friends. I want to make sure I get this right. It's not throwing a kick 1,000 times. Let me see. I have to look up the quote. But throwing a kick 1,000 times, I'll have to get that. Man, I can't believe I messed that from there. But yeah, it's all about repetition and style. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you, Google.